It's him. And did I finally watch the second season of Interview with the Vampire? Maybe. Is it been like over a year? I think so. Look, I've been busy. Honestly, it was more like I didn't want to pay for AMC, and then like I was told it was going to be on Netflix, but it never showed up on Netflix, and finally I just bit the bullet and decided to watch the second season because I was seeing like stuff about the third season already, and I was like, oh man, okay, I just gotta catch up. So I did. When we last left, Louis, Lestat, and Claudia, our unhappy little family, it was Mardi Gras 1940, I believe, and Lestat had made himself more or less king of a made-up crew called, I think, Raj. And they were having their big party, and Louis and Claudia finally made good on the plan to murder Lestat and his other fledgling, I guess, Antoinette. They threw him in the trash, like quite literally, and headed off to Europe. Now, it's not like the best time to be going to Europe, 1940. There's a war and everything, but they're vampires. They're not too fussed about it. They are looking for other vampires, so they start in Eastern Europe, because that is kind of where old world vampires technically are supposed to come from in all the literature and stories and whatnot. They find mostly these mindless vampires, or at least in the novel, which of course in the novel Claudia and Louis are traveling in the 1800s, so we've got like about a century bump here of win. But they're kind of making their way through Europe. They're making their way through war-torn Europe and posing as Americans who are looking for Louis's missing wife, who had, I guess, joined up to be a nurse or something of that sort. They find, I guess, a version of the mindless vampires from the novel. There's a woman, a female vampire, who has these kind of mindless children. She's obviously also very ancient and barely holding on to her wits, as it were. And Claudia is so excited, and Louis is also pretty pleased, but I think he's mostly happy because Claudia is happy, you know. It never meant that much to him to find these other vampires, but Claudia means everything to him. So they're all happy together until the old woman vampire throws herself into the fire, which is pretty much what Magnus did after making Lestat. He was like, okay, I made you, I'm going now, peace out. So Claudia and Louis are horrified, and only then did they go, let's go to Paris. I understand why they started with the old world, like, you know, they finally just go, you know what, we'll be happier if we go among civilized people, I don't know, there's a little bit of subtle racism there, maybe, I'm not sure. They go to Paris and find the Théâtre des Vampires. This is Armand's coven. This is the theater that Lestat started, or yeah, I guess he did. He more or less encouraged Armand to start after seeing how pitiful the Parisian vampires were living in these. They were living in Les Innocents, the old cemetery, because they believed they were evil, but they were serving God by being agents of evil. Like, God needs something to battle against, therefore vampires are a thing. It's this black and white world, and they need to be, you know, the black side so that the light side is light, right? There's a logic to it. It's not great, but it kind of makes sense. But they see Lestat living his best life as this vampire in his wolf fur cape. The wolf fur cape has arrived, everybody. You don't know the number of jokes me and my friends used to make about this wolf fur cape. Anyway, Lestat has arrived and brought modernity, which at the time was like the late 1700s, right? Mid to late 1700s. he's brought modernity. He's living his best life as a vampire. They are absolutely outraged. They steal his boyfriend. And Lestat kind of is forced to turn Nikki into a vampire to save him-ish. But that doesn't work too well because Nikki is not mentally stable enough to be a vampire. That is definitely that's a flaw Lestat has. He tends to pick people who he needs, and it's a codependent thing, but the problem being that's not like a mentally healthy place for being. Sorry, my crows are like losing their minds outside. I have 5 crows, and I don't know what they're doing. Anyway, it's not a very healthy mental space to become a vampire and suddenly be faced with immortality and also the need and desire to take life on a regular basis like that. That's a lot for a person, for just any person, but especially for a person who is not equipped to deal with it. Therefore, Lestat, he chose Nikki, and then later he chose Louis, who was in a similarly not great mental state, at least in the book. I guess in the show too. I didn't rewatch the first season. I don't have like really strong memories of it, so I'm like, I don't think he was quite as bad off as Louis in the book, though. This is all done. We do get some of this in flashback later, but this is kind of the foundation for the Théâtre des Vampires, which Louis and Claudia only discover a little bit later. They're in Paris. Louis has taken up photography as a hobby. They're just enjoying kind of being in Paris, but Claudia's getting a little bored until, like, Armand and the other vampires have kind of realized they're there. And they get invited to a show. We don't get the Santiago buffoon thing from the book and the movie. We do get a lot of Santiago, though, who in this version is so good. He walks that line of, like, you love him, you hate him really, really well. In the books, he's just obnoxious. He's annoying. He's the worst. Here, actually, I think Armand's almost worse, but we'll get to that. Santiago is the prima donna of this troupe, this coven. He is their lead actor, their star, because Armand is really just a director in this. He doesn't star in any of it. Louis and Claudia accept the invitation. They go, because Louis and Armand already, like, from the start are like, ooh. They kind of eyeing each other, circling each other a little bit here. Claudia's just so excited to find other vampires, and vampires that aren't mindless. They actually have a purpose. They have a good life. They go out hunting together. Louis joins them a couple times. It's not his thing. He's not into the group dynamic, I guess. But he's sticking around for Claudia and for Armand, right? Like, there's this kind of tug-of-war. I don't see or feel in this series the tug-of-war in Louis as much. It's very clear he loves Claudia. It's clear he's interested in Armand. But I don't get the sense he feels like he's being torn in two here, like being asked to make a decision. He's trying to find, I think, a middle ground where everybody's happy. It lacked a little bit of the tension from that arena. However, there is plenty of tension from other places. In short, the tension is not between Armand and Louis. It's not a will they or won't they. It's not like, will Louis stay with Claudia or will he go with Armand? That doesn't seem to be the point of the tension. What we've got is whether or not the troupe, who have this painting of Lestat in their, like, subterranean dressing area, it's not a good painting. I would not have looked at that painting and thought, oh, that's Lestat. Let's just say, no shade to the art department. I'm sure they're doing their best. This was not a great portrait. I did not immediately recognize him, let's just say. But they, he's their great founder. He's very, revered in a way by this coven because he showed them the light. And not literally, but kind of. He showed them the stage light. The spotlight. They had, like, gas lamps back then. Well, but this is the 40s now. I don't know. Anyway, the big fear is that the Coven will discover that they actually that Lestat was their maker and they murdered Lestat. They make this whole story up about a vampire named Bruce that created them. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. There are definite holes in the story. I'm like, these vampires can hear your thoughts. And the problem is, Louis keeps hallucinating Lestat, which I think was a very clever way of them keeping Sam Reed on screen at least a little bit, because obviously in the book we just lose Lestat for a big chunk of the book, right? He's just not there. We are supposed to assume he's dead. I think the showrunners know that there's a big fan base, so they're like, well, we can't just have him not here for 6 episodes. We'll find ways, and it isn't completely out of character, because in later books, Merrick, I think, is when Louis is like seeing and talking to the ghost of Claudia on a regular basis. So this is a Louis thing anyway. So, but the problem being that if Louis is hallucinating Lestat and thinking about Lestat all the time, somebody's going to pick up on it. Somehow it's only Armand, which I didn't quite understand. Maybe because Louis is keeping a little bit of distance between himself and the Coven. And Claudia, I assume, just doesn't think about Lestat at all. She's like, he's gone, whatever. She only thinks about him when she has cause to worry that they're going to be found out, maybe. It's not real clear. So Claudia is inducted into the Coven and becomes one of the stage people. Armand and Louis are kind of doing this side thing. The Coven's getting a little irritated because Armand is not spending as much time with them. He's supposed to be their director, but also, their leader. He's in charge, and he's kind of faffing off. To be fair, the Coven kind of runs itself at this point. It's been doing this for like a century or whatever, a couple centuries now. So do you really need your director there all the time? But they're trying to come up with new material, and they're trying, I could see both sides. Oh, and then there's Madeleine, who in the book is a little bit crazy because she lost her daughter. In this version, she is a young French woman who had some kind of fling romance. It's unclear if she makes it seem like nothing, but it does seem like it maybe happened more than once, that she had this thing with a young Nazi soldier. So she's considered a traitor, and her dress shop gets vandalized pretty regularly, and Claudia befriends her, and it kind of moves towards romantic. And this is not, I want a daughter who can't die. This is not that from the movie. This is something else. But we do get finally that Madeleine is made into a vampire, but it isn't that Claudia tries to do it and isn't strong enough to do it, because in the book she's 5. She's not strong enough to drain a full-grown, I guess she can drain full-grown people, but she can't then turn around and give enough back to create a vampire. So she has Louis do it for her, which he is loath to do. He never wanted to make another vampire, but in the book he does it because he loves Claudia, and it gives Claudia a companion who can care for her so that he can go off with Armand. That is the ultimate, she says, give her to me, Louis, before you leave me. And it's only fair because Claudia is of a size, shape, and physical age that doesn't allow her to live alone in the world, move alone through the world. She has to have a companion. That's why it's one of the laws is not to make a vampire that is too young to care for itself. I mean, Claudia is perfectly capable, obviously, but as the world perceives her, it would not work. They're supposed to get Armand's permission to make Madeleine into a vampire, and they kind of do in the TV version. It's one of the rules that you can't just make one without the Coven masters, the maîtres, permission. And Armand kind of looks askance. He doesn't necessarily give permission, but he does just kind of look the other way. But he doesn't also let the Coven know that he was allowing that to happen, because he doesn't want to upset them any more than they already are. Armand, like I said, Armand is the worst, okay? Because at least with Lestat, what you see is what you get. Now, Lestat is a great actor, but he's not a liar. I don't want to say he's not a liar, but he's not a manipulator in the way that Armand is. Armand, who will fuck with your memories and, do whatever it takes to get what you want, keep you with him on his side. Like, he's actually pretty clingy, at least in the books. This Armand is kind of too, but not to the degree of the book one. Now, again, that Armand is very different. He's, I think, about 15 years old physically, because Marius in the book was waiting for him to get older before making him a vampire, and then had to do it when their art school academy was attacked, set on fire. In order to save Armand, he had to turn Armand into a vampire. I think in this version, they've made him canonically like 27 physically. And instead of being from the Russian steppes, he's from India. His birth name is Arun. And then he's renamed Amadio. And then just Armand is the French version of that. Armand is sinister and sneaky in a way that Lestat is not. Sorry, I had to stop and pull my hair partly back because it was making me crazy. So, Paris, the Coven is starting to suspect. We do get a moment of Santiago's mimicry, which is what he's best known for in the book version, for mimicking Louis in that first encounter. He doesn't speak to Louis, but he mimics all of Louis's movements like perfectly, and Louis calls him a buffoon, and Santiago takes that very badly. And in this version, he obviously speaks quite a bit and is, a prima donna. And then they're all at dinner, I guess. They're all at a restaurant, it seems like. Like, why? But why would you bother? But okay, you're a vampire. Do you eat? Anyway. And Louis and Armand are talking, and Santiago starts mimicking Louis's dialect, accent, whatever you want to call it. And Louis gets irritated, and they start a fight. And Armand has this fun trick of, like, stopping time or something. I don't know. This is a new one on me. So I was just like, okay, how does this work? And how often? And what exactly did you just slow everything down a lot, or is everything actually frozen? Like, it's not a power that's well explained, but we've kind of reached the pinnacle of the breaking point, I guess. And at that point, Santiago and his coven mates start planning the attack on Louis and Claudia and Madeline. Now, because at this point they realize that they've broken multiple laws. They murdered Lestat. They made a vampire without permission. Claudia was too young to be made a vampire in the first place, so she shouldn't have been made a vampire. I think there's something else, but it doesn't matter. They've broken a bunch of these vampire laws, these great laws, that they didn't even know because they were never really taught them, but whatever. Ignorance of the law is no, excuse for breaking it, as it's often said. And then we get the big reveal, which we all kind of, if you've read the books, Lestat is actually still alive. He's in Paris. He is there to get his revenge, ostensibly. Now, the truth is, Lestat doesn't really want revenge on Louis, or at least in the book he doesn't. He wants Claudia out of the way so that he can have all of Louis's attention and affection again. And it is twisted logic. He's like, if I get rid of Claudia and save Louis, Louis will love me again. We'll start over. It'll be fine. Like, Louis will be grateful that I saved him. Here's the thing. A lot of the books is everybody loves Lestat. Louis and Claudia don't, and that really kind of both attracts him and irks him, because he's like, well, then I gotta do things to make you love me, and then you'll love me too. And like, that is very core to Lestat's personality. He's just like, I need that attention and affection. I need to be center of everything all the time. His affection and love is very real, I think, and it runs very deep, but he does not have good coping mechanisms, and he does not have good ways of showing how he feels. And I guess if we do the Vampire Lestat next season, maybe we'll get his backstory, because I know they've cast Gabrielle. I think I saw it as Gabriella, though, and I was like, why is she suddenly not French? I don't know. And I think they also cast Magnus, but, like, I'm curious to see what they're going to do there. The picture I saw of the person who was Magnus, I was kind of like, huh? So Lestat has arrived. They're going to do their big trial. They're going to put Madeline, Claudia, and Louis on trial. They grab Madeline, Armand, Louis, and Claudia from a bistro or a cafe or wherever they're at and haul them off to the theater and do the trial during the day, which is surprising because I thought that most vampires, well, they're all pretty old. They can stay awake during the day. Like, the older you get, the less sleepy you get. During daylight hours, you can actually be awake pretty much all the time if you want. But I would think Claudia and Louis are still relatively young and still sleepy during the day. I don't know. Again, I think we're just kind of glossing over a lot of that. And then, Lestat is there, and they've got Armand, a prisoner, up in a box seat or something. We'll get to that too. In the present timeline, of course, this is Daniel Malloy interviewing Louis, and at first Armand is there, but he doesn't want to be on the record, and then he kind of agrees to be on the record, so Daniel's interviewing them both, but he's also getting these weird flashes, flashbacks, something, particularly of Armand, and he is starting to remember what actually happened in San Francisco in 1973 when he first interviewed Louis. And Armand was there because Louis and Armand have actually been together for 77 years at this point. Not to tell you how the whole trial thing ends, but they've been together for a long time. So Armand was there in San Francisco with Louis back in the day, back during that first interview that went sideways, and we discover that it's because Armand and Louis were having a rocky patch in their relationship, let's say, and Armand was jealous of Louis going out and finding these young boys, these fascinating young boys, and the drug scene, this, that, and the other. And Daniel is starting to remember that Armand, implanted false memories in him, and he's also realizing that Louis at that point attempted to commit suicide by going out into the sun, and Armand hauled him back into the house on Divisadero Street so that he could heal, and was holding Daniel hostage at the same time, and was, I think at that point, spoke to Lestat and was trying to communicate between Lestat and Louis as an intermediary, because Lestat and Louis cannot communicate telepathically directly because the Maker and the fledgling don't have that connection. But Armand refused to relate the I love you from Lestat to Louis, obviously. He's not going to be and Lestat says he loves you. No, that wasn't going to happen. So we know in 1973 that Lestat was still alive. Again, no surprise. He's got really ancient blood. It'd take more than a little to kill him. We get kind of this backstory. We also get the introduction of Raglan James and the Talamasca, who Daniel meets at a sushi restaurant during a break from the interviewing. Raglan James, if you've read the books, is the titular body thief in Tale of the Body Thief. And in fact, at some point, they make a fun reference, well, if I could switch bodies with you. I'm like, oh, come on, don't be obvious. I like this show, but sometimes I feel like it's also not a good show. I'm enjoying the chemistry. I think the character acting is spot on, okay? It's really hard to nail someone like Lestat. Sam's got him down. At the same time, sometimes the dialogue, I'm just I know that they say stupid, ridiculous things. They're very these vampires are very poetic in their own way. They like embroidered language a lot of the time, but sometimes it's just dumb. It's just dumb. So, yeah, I'm just like, guys, come on. Send me a script. I'll clean it up for you. I'll punch it up. We do get some jumping around. We've got the 1940 timeline. We've got the present timeline. We've got a jump back to the 70s. Towards the end of all this, as they're talking about the night that Louis gets his revenge, because, the trial goes like you would think. Madeline and Claudia are sentenced to death. Louis is sentenced to banishment. And Louis has thought all these years that Armand used his, mental abilities to get the audience, because I guess for whatever reason they let the audience choose the punishment, to say banishment instead of death. And Santiago's pretty put out by it, but weirdly enough, Lestat does not cry foul. He's just like, okay. So they lock Louis in a coffin with a bunch of rocks and shove him in a crypt to starve. And since they had this trial during the day, they open the windows, let the light shine on Madeline and Claudia, and let them, burn. We get through all of this until Daniel kind of points out a few flaws, a few holes in the story, and leads Louis to understand and see and realize that Lestat was the one who saved him. Lestat was the one who insisted on banishment, because of course he did. Again, like I said, his goal had always been, if we just remove Claudia from the equation. The problem is things were going wrong before Claudia, but things went even more wrong after Claudia. So Lestat has decided Claudia's the problem. She's the one who made the whole plan to kill him and all that. Louis never would have done it because Louis doesn't have those kind of guts. This version of Louis is at least not as gutless as book Louis, but I guess we can't just have a depressed guy for however many hours of television, though. He's got to have some gumption. He's got to have some spine. So I get it. Lestat logic is just like, okay, if we get rid of Claudia and we spare Louis and I can be together again, and it'll all be fine. And that's obviously not how it goes, because Louis thinks Armand saved him. Armand takes the credit, and Lestat, interestingly, lets him. He's like, okay, well, we'll just see how long this lasts. Well, it's lasted 77 years. Until now, until Daniel's like, Louis like, And they have a lovely little fight. And Raglan from the Talamasca is texting, well, he's IMing, I guess, on Daniel's computer, like, get out of there now. Daniel, I don't think, gets out fast enough, as we discover, but we know from the books that Daniel does eventually become a vampire. He and Armand have a very interesting relationship in the books, and I will put up again my favorite little snippet in which Daniel calls Armand an immortal idiot. But it's a great moment. It's a great moment. But in the books, Daniel, he ends up kind of aimless, homeless, wandering the streets. Armand checks on him periodically. He stays with Armand for a while, and then he wanders off again. Like, they have this until Armand finally makes him a vampire. Armand, too, in the books, it's very weird when he and Louis travel the world. Now, remember, this is the 1800s and into, I guess, the early 1900s at that point. And then they go back to New Orleans, and Armand just kind of he makes New Orleans his territory and chases off other vampires, and it becomes a very weird thing. Louis goes off to San Francisco without him in the books. It's hard to be monogamous when you're immortal, right? Like, nothing lasts forever, as they say. At some point, you've been together so long, you're driving each other crazy. Like, all the things you like about them, you start to hate about them. It's a natural cycle, I would think. Louis, after the realization, he goes back to New Orleans, because that is where Lestat is. Now, in the books, Lestat has buried himself in the ground, and it's like rock music that kind of brings him back up in the 1980s. He starts hearing and feeling new, interesting vibes, I guess, and comes out into the world and discovers that Interview with the Vampire is a hit, and it was Louis, and Louis told all these things about him, and how dare he let me set the story straight. He becomes a rock star, which, based on things I've seen for the next season, is more or less where we're headed. And I think it's interesting because Anne had said that she always pictured Lestat as, well, first of all, she pictured him as Rutger Hauer, which maybe a young Rutger Hauer, I don't know. She also pictured him in the Rockstar era as a Jim Morrison type. And I think they kind of have that down from what I've seen. I think they kind of do have that. That's kind of where they went with it. Louis goes back to New Orleans in the present timeline. Finds Lestat during a hurricane named Odette. And you know what? It's a really sweet moment. Kind of a really nice catharsis of them seeing each other and acknowledging each other. They hug. It was funny because Angel was watching, we were watching together, and Angel's just like, I just want them to hug, and then they hug, and it was like, yes, they gave us what we really wanted. We want the scars to heal here, you know what I mean? And yeah, I liked it. I'm sad, actually, that it took me so long to get around to watching it. So I will hopefully be timely with season 3 when it comes out next year. I'm trying to decide if I want to go ahead and try and finish that reread of Queen of the Damned. I was really struggling with it, but maybe it's been long enough that I can pick it up and finish rereading it. Sorry, this has been all over the place. Too long didn't watch. It was good. We've got Armand and Louis broken up now. We've got Lestat about to embark on some kind of rock star arc as per the books. Daniel's a vampire now, which, if you read the books, you knew was going to happen eventually, and we can only assume this is what Armand did. Like, Louis tells Armand, if you hurt him, I will kill you, you know. So Armand makes him a vampire because, like, arguably that's not hurting him. Maybe it is. I mean, Daniel seems to be enjoying it, so good for him. Go live your best life, Daniel. And Daniel does release the book, but I have to assume it's a version that's very different from the one that exists in our world, because it's going to have been based on whatever this interview was that we just witnessed, that is a decidedly different story. So that's it. That's Interview with the Vampire Season 2. Yeah, I liked it. I'm looking forward to more. Let me know your thoughts if you've watched it, if you've read the books, if you want to compare and contrast, if I forgot anything, missed anything, misremembered anything, let me know. And until next time, take care.